I wondered many times how I was going to get with it, through it. But I was determined. I was born and raised a stubborn person. And still am, aren't I, Terry? Anyway, I don't know that it's stubborn, but it's just, I refuse to give up. I was born April the 16th in 1925, and I was born in a farmhouse out from Argonia, Kansas. I had an older brother, an older sister, Guy, and Bonnie, and we lived in a little house south of town, and a cyclone came and blew the house away, and we moved to Missouri because my mother came from Missouri. And we moved into a little house that belonged to her brother, and my dad couldn't find work. So he decided he'd go back to Argonia to work for his mom and dad, who did wheat farming, and left me there with my brother and sister and my mother. And she had a twin sister, Ada. We moved into town to live with her. I don't know how long my dad was gone, but in the meantime, I guess my mom was running around with other men. She decided that she didn't need all three of us, so she sent my brother and my sister to Kansas on the train by themselves to my dad. And my dad said, if she doesn't want all three of you, she doesn't get any of you. He went to an attorney. Back then, you could cross the state line and not be arrested for taking your children. So he and my uncle Ben got in an old Model T and drove down to where I was in Kabul, Missouri, living with my mom and Ada. And we kept going until we got to Kansas, and we moved in with my grandma and grandpa, my dad's mom and dad. I lived on a farm with my grandma and grandpa. We did not have TVs then. We didn't have telephones then. Our water was carried out in the house from an outside well. So you don't get much information when you don't have when you don't have all this stuff like we have today. But you know about it about as quick as they do. My sister and I, because all the men were in the service that were eligible, my sister and I had to do the outside work. I never learned to cook. My aunt and my grandma cooked, because we had this family that was the aunt and an uncle and a grandma and a grandpa, and my dad and us three children lived there, all this in a four-room house. And we were kept busy. I learned to drive on a John Deere tractor. I had to help combine. Take the wheat to town to the elevator to send it off, and I never learned to cook. And people can't get over that. I don't even like to cook. Now, I like to sew. My sister liked to cook. But anyway, that's a long after the war was over. But I graduated in 1944 from high school, and then I went to Wichita to work and got a job in Watkins Incorporated. Good job in the office as a secretary. And in the meantime, I knew this woman, Martha.
Ruth's friend Martha, who lived with her own grandmother at the time, had asked Ruth to walk to the train station with her to pick up her cousin Richard, who was in the Navy. It was late February and the station was 12 blocks from their home. Ruth was reluctant, but soon complied. After walking the 12 blocks in the rigid cold to pick up Martha's cousin, they headed back home. For the next 5 days, Richard would be at Ruth's doorstep wanting to spend time together. Then, on the 5th day, Ruth and Richard were married.
But from what I understand, he joined the service partially because of past family members' position in the world also. So we've got a bit of history Again, my mother's very aware of, some of the stuff that went on her side of the family. Again, we've had people on both sides of the Civil War in our family. And the date that we go back to 1534 on this country,
He had still in the service, and we went to California on the train, and we were stationed in Long Beach, California. And I got to go, when I was in California, the USS Caperton was a destroyer. He was the tail gunner on these ships, yes. And we got to go aboard the Caperton to see all of how they lived, everything.
But I'm proud of my father and what I'm aware that he went through. Being on a destroyer, being on a submarine.
In the meantime, 1945, when he got out of the service, though, first before this happened, we opened up a little confectionery ice cream store in my hometown of Argonia, and it's called the Big Dipper, and we were doing really pretty good. All of a sudden, I found out he was playing around on me, and so I just kind of put my foot down, and he decided he better get back in the service. So he rejoined the Navy in 1948.
Being an MP, downtown Chicago is not a pretty place, not today, not back then. He was a shore patrol. He was a tough cookie. SP, shore patrol. He was a cop, a military cop. And when I inherited his belly club, not a nick on it. Must have been a brand new belly club that he had.
And they sent him to Rockford. Never heard of that place. Anyway, they sent him down here on 15th Avenue and was living at the Nelson Hotel when he asked me to come up here. And I went to the bus station to get a ticket to Rockford, Illinois, and they said, "Where's that?" And I said, "Don't ask me, I've never heard of it either." And so anyway, they scheduled me to come up on the bus, and oh, what a long trip that was. But I got here, and we lived with some people that he had met until we found our own place. We lived on Gardner, North Gardner, for a while. And then we knew some friends that were going in the Salvation Army. And this young couple had a house on Shorland Road out there in North Park. And they gave us that equity in that house because they couldn't have anything in their name when they joined. So we lived there for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. And then we moved up the street to Spruce Street and rented that little house out. And then we had a chance to sell those 2 houses and buy where we live now. And we've been there since 1963.
Ruth and Richard had a total of 4 children after 8 years of being married. They adopted their first daughter, who was deaf after she caught meningitis at only 6 years old. Then 8 months and 1 week later, they had a little boy of their own named Ricky. 3 years after that, they had a baby boy named Terry, and then a little girl named Wendy.
Richard worked at Rockford Screw Products for years and years and years, and he had to quit because he had a heart condition. And of course, he couldn't work at Screw Products anymore because they wouldn't cover him.
Richard had many jobs throughout his lifetime, other than at Rockford Screw Products. After developing his heart condition, he moved on to selling homeschool products, then became a Boy Scouts commissioner, and finally, during meetings in Martin Park, Richard would be responsible for providing coffee and other refreshments.
He went to the VA hospital in Madison whenever they needed him to come up. But I had the 2 boys and the girl at home, and I had just got out of the garden, went up to the house to make supper for the children, and Bill Schaefer was there to pick up the coffee pot because Richard wasn't home to take it down to the park. And a phone rang, and I answered it, and he said, "Is this Mrs. Carl?" And I said, "Yes, it is." I said, "Who is this?" And he said, "This is the sheriff's department in Wisconsin. Your husband just collapsed and died." Can you imagine? That's how I got the information that their father had passed away. And I handed the phone to Bill and let him take over. And so then, of course, here I have 4 children to take care of and a house to pay for. Anyway, so therefore I am a widow woman at age 41. But they needed a father figure in their life, but we didn't have one. I just had to do it.
After Richard's passing, Ruth went on to meet a gentleman named DeWitt. They were married for 20 years until he passed away from old age and heart issues.
I guess I did it out of loneliness, I don't really know. It was companionship.
After DeWitt's death, Ruth stayed home and met another man named Ralph. They met when Ruth borrowed his camper for her mother and stepfather to come and visit. After meeting again at the VFW, they hit it off and were married from December of 1992 to 1997 when he passed away. Finally, Ruth reconnected with Cecil, her high school sweetheart, after they lost touch for about 50 years until reconnecting one day during a family reunion in Colorado over the phone. They were married on June 4th, 1999.
And the last time I was going to go down on the train, he said, "Just get a one-way ticket." So I did, and I came back married.
Cecil struggled with heart issues for several years until passing on March 12th, almost 11 years after they reconnected.
It was just happy. You know, my children accepted every one of these men as their father, even though it wasn't a blood father, out of respect. And that's one thing that we taught them, to respect their elders. Always respect your elders.
Date that we go back to 1534 on this country, you know, it's amazing that we are where we are in this world today because of, you know, all the good stuff and the bad stuff happening. All I can say is that, you know, I'm glad that I'm a veteran. I'm glad my dad's a veteran. I'm glad my 3 stepfathers were veterans. And all the good that we do here in America and throughout the world.
Anyway, that's right, never give up. They throw stones at you, you'd be surprised. It's not easy. It's not easy, but it's worth it. It's just been a fun life, but it's been a hard life. All 4 of my children still love me. I'm proud of that. And I know sometimes they probably wish I wasn't quite so harsh on them, but I don't think I ever beat you.
But I get up every day and I thank God that, you know, I live in America and was given the choice to, you know, the choices that I was given. I joined the service and it was a very, very good experience. I'm glad I didn't have to shoot anybody. I'm glad I didn't have to go overseas. You know, if I can say anything, I just, if I can do one thing to inspire anybody, please join the service. Do something good for yourself and the country. Inspire people around you to be happy. Try not to be a negative person. Just, everybody's got to quit being so angry. We are just we're good people. We're, you know, look at the problems we've got within the world. you know, locally and, you know, internationally. Just, you know, do the right thing, people. That's all I can say. You know, try to be there for each other, and if your country needs you, please sign up.
Not only did I form a bond between Ruth and Terry and myself, I also formed a bond with this entire class. This class is not just a class. To me, it is a second family. I absolutely can't imagine myself not being in this class. And I am just amazed at what Ruth and Terry and others had to go through with everything, and I'm just amazed by the fact that they had the strength to overcome this. But I just am so happy that I'm the one that gets to pass along their history and make their story known about everything, because they're unlike anything else. It's amazing what they had to go through and what they did go through, and how it made them better people altogether. The laughs that I got through the documentary and the tears that I shed because of the touching stories that they shared, it just made it 10 times more worth it to do this documentary and share their history. I'm just so glad that I get to know them and the class, and I've formed this second family and just made all these memories with everybody. I'm just so thankful for the people who did help me through everything, and I'm just thankful for Ruth and Terry for opening their hearts and their story to me so I can carry their story through. Thank you for everything that you have done, and thank you to the teachers and the other classmates. I honestly don't think I could have done it without you guys, and I'm just so happy that I get to have this second family and know these people.